Good evening, Singapore. Good evening, Singapore. I hope all of you can hear me clearly. And welcome again to Lim Tean After Work. It's great to be with all of you. I hope you had a good day. Busy over here as usual. I've got a very full month ahead with lots of court work, various things. But what an exciting week it has been as well, right? Well, maybe exciting is the wrong word to use, but eventful week, which I shall come on to very shortly. Now, when we advertised the show this evening, we said I was going to talk about two topics. I was going to talk about the Party Liane case, which has gripped Singapore for the last 6 days. And I was going to talk about COVID. Yeah. Now, before I come to the Party Liane case, which is going to take up the bulk of this show, I just want to spend a few minutes talking about COVID. And of course, that has now receded into the back recess of many people's minds because the number of cases have come down. But I do not know if you realize that today a big scandal has broken out in America. And it has broken out in America because of an interview or a series of interviews that President Trump gave to Bob Woodward. Bob Woodward is the very famous investigative journalist who first came to prominence in the 1970s when he and his partner Carl Bernstein investigated into the Watergate scandal. Watergate was the scandal that brought down President Richard Nixon, who till today is the only American president to have resigned his office. And what the scandal showed was that President Nixon had orchestrated the break-in into the Democratic National Committee's office in this place in Washington known as the Watergate Complex. And so Woodward has been famous since then into a series of investigations he has conducted. And in early this year, he interviewed President Trump on the emerging crisis, which we now know as COVID. And Woodward has now published a book called Rage, R-A-G-E. He published an earlier book about President Trump and his administration called Fear, and this is the follow-up. And President Trump gave a series of interviews to Bob Woodward, and one of the most remarkable interviews took place on the 7th of February, in which President Trump told Bob Woodward that even then he knew that, and these are President Trump's own words, COVID was highly contagious, airborne, and more deadly than flu. And when Bob Woodward asked him, then why did you downplay the seriousness of COVID? Trump said, well, he didn't want to create panic. All right? And he said that was what leadership was about. It was not to create panic. And of course, the whole of America today is in uproar because people are saying, why didn't you tell us the truth? Why didn't you tell us the truth? All right? All the time you were telling us that this would just miraculously go away one day, and there was nothing to be concerned about. And why were you not telling people that it was compulsory to mask? Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, my friends on both YouTube and Facebook, as early as February, the Americans knew how deadly COVID was. All right? This was even before COVID had hit their shores. Okay? And the National Security Advisor of America had told Donald Trump that COVID was going to be the greatest security test of his administration. And you know what was the other revealing thing President Trump said in his interviews with Bob Woodward? He said, yeah, this is not an old man's sickness. The young are equally affected. And this is contrary to what all of us were told, weren't we? That, oh, you know, the young people are okay. It is not so easy for them to get this sickness. All right? You remember what Ong Ye Kung told us? That the young are not vectors. And that was why it was still all right for them to carry on with the opening of schools. Yeah, schools could remain open. And so the Americans knew. Yeah. And yet in Singapore, we are led to believe that the PAP government followed WHO guidelines all the way. So WHO said, oh no, no need to mask unless unwell. All right? That the illness cannot be transmitted unless someone is showing symptoms or has symptoms of the illness. You know, I find it quite ridiculous. I find it quite ridiculous for this reason. We were probably the only country in Southeast Asia, or maybe there were one or two others, and other countries like Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, and other places had told their citizens to mask. Masking was compulsory. Social distancing, you know, was encouraged. In fact, later became mandatory as well. And here we did absolutely nothing. Not until the 7th of April. All right? Other countries had lockdowns, you know, their workers were encouraged to work from home, and here the PAP government did absolutely nothing. For People's Voice, we had told Singaporeans right at the beginning of February, it is absolutely necessary to mask. The government should order work from home. Schools should close. We should practice social distancing and all that. None of that was heeded. And, you know, people have been made to go through economic sufferings as a result. And I come back to it again. If we had taken all those steps back in early February, we would not be today going through this prolonged economic crisis that has resulted because of COVID. Well, my friends, I think this thing is going to come back with a vengeance now that the scandal has been blown up in America and people now realize that what the American administration knew as early February, all right? And actually not telling the people the truth. So I think you can see in the coming days, Americans are going to get very, very angry about the situation. Now, whether this is going to lead to the defeat of President Trump in the elections in November, one has to see. I am not going to make any prediction, all right? I think President Trump has shown himself to be the Teflon president. Nothing seems to stick to him very much. But I think people have grounds to be really angry. And here in Singapore, I think we have grounds to be really angry with the PAP government as to why they did not take the necessary steps to protect our public health and people's safety. Yeah, to me, it was highly irresponsible. Don't tell me you have so many medical experts around you. that you are just blindly, rigidly following WHO guidelines. And I still remember very early on in the crisis when a group of 4 doctors, including Dr. Colleen Thomas, whom I've had, the privilege of meeting since, coming out with a letter saying that it is common sense for you to mask. Yeah. And even then, you had the government's so-called expert, damning this advice and saying that there is no evidence that the illness can be transmitted through the air. To them, everything was through droplets. Well, we now know, don't we? The Americans knew better as early as February. Yeah, that this illness is airborne. But of course, what they did after that is almost criminal in not letting their own people know the severity and seriousness of the illness and how it can actually be transmitted. So that's all I'm going to say about COVID. I hope you do follow the developments in America, learn more about this illness, yeah, why it is absolutely necessary to test, and the dangers of transmission. It is not all just through people who are showing symptoms. In fact, asymptomatic people are big spreaders of the disease. And which is why People's Voice has always said, we must protect our young, all right? They may be asymptomatic, but that does not mean that they cannot be big spreaders to the adults, Unlike what Ong Yi Kang has been telling us all this time. No, they are not vectors. They are not the spreaders of the disease. So please go and look up on the internet as to what is now being revealed in America. Okay? But I want now to come on to the main topic that has gripped Singapore for the last 6 days. And that is the Party Liane story. Now, I did not realize the significance of the case until, I kept getting all these feed stories on my Facebook. And then I started to look into it. And when I started to look into it, the story really shocked me. And then I started to read excerpts from Justice Chan Seng-on's brilliantly well articulated and very clear judgment. It shocked me. But it should not shock me because in recent years, I have done criminal work. And I can tell you, I can empathize with what Party Liane went through. And the scale of incompetence of the investigative work in her case is just mind-boggling. Let me just give you a few instances. All right? Now, Mr. Liew and his son made a police report against her on the 30th of October. All right? 2016. She had, of course, already left Singapore by then. They had given her 2 hours notice or 3 hours notice to pack up her things before she was to leave the house. All right, that was all the time she had. After she had left Singapore, Mr. Liew then returned from overseas. And after lunch and some discussion with his family members and a brief rummage through the so-called three boxes which he had packed up, all right, they made the police report that afternoon, he and his son Carl. Now, upon making that report, or what we call the first information report, FIR. You know what the police did? They immediately issued a warrant of arrest for Party Liane. And this I find very shocking. So you are saying that Mr. Liew and his son Carl's evidence is all you need to satisfy yourself that a potential crime has been committed. You have not interrogated Party Liane, all right? You have not even gone to the scene of the alleged crime. You have not even looked at the items that were claimed to have been stolen by her. All right? And based on that, the police were happy to issue a warrant of arrest. Now, the police did not go to the family home of the Liews, which was at 49 Chancery Lane, until some 5 weeks later, on the 3rd of December. Now, in the meantime, Party Liane had returned back to Singapore on the 2nd of December because she wanted to look for employment. And when she stepped onto Singapore soil and was going through the airport, she was arrested based on the warrant of arrest that had been issued on the 30th of October. And the things that she had in her possession were then basically confiscated and sealed. All right? But you know something? The police had not gone to the crime scene until a day after she was arrested upon her return to Singapore. And so then they go to 49 Chancery Lane and they started taking photographs, okay, of the alleged stolen items from these 3 boxes. And you know what? The items, these so-called stolen items, were not officially taken into police custody and sealed until April of 2018. My goodness. You are talking about a period of 1.5 years from the time of the alleged commission of the crime until these things come into the possession of the police. Right? And you know what? After the police report was made on the 30th of October, the investigating officer had told the Liews, yeah, you can use the items that belong to you which were stolen. Can you believe that? Can you believe how incompetent this advice was from the police? Yeah, it's like, oh yes, your mate has stolen several items from you. No, there is no need for you to keep them aside. You can continue using these items. Is it any wonder that, and frankly, I don't know on what basis the maid was convicted in the district court, but of course, on appeal, Justice Chan Sing-on said, there is a break in the causation of events. Because how can you be sure after all this time that the items you are now alleging she stole were the items you actually found in the 3 boxes that she packed to be sent back to Indonesia? All right? No one can be sure, especially, and let me remind all of you, or maybe educate all of you, you know, in a criminal case, you have to satisfy the court beyond reasonable doubt, all right? And that is the burden of proof in any criminal case. beyond reasonable doubt that the crime was committed. It is not like in a civil case where one side wins, the plaintiff wins, if he can satisfy the court on a balance of probabilities that that is what happened. Here you must satisfy the judge beyond reasonable doubt that that is actually what happened. And who can say in these circumstances? Who can prove beyond a reasonable doubt given the set of events I have just painted? All right? So I am not going to go too much into the details of the judgment. Yeah, it's a 100-page judgment. It's a very well written and very well reasoned judgment. And I urge all of you, if you are interested in it, to go onto the internet, go onto the Supreme Court website, where you can actually find the judgment. Yeah, and the name of the case is PP, Public Prosecutor versus Party Liane. Okay, but I now want to turn to one part of the judgment, because this is the part which has elicited the most comment. Yeah, and it is the part, it is paragraph 49 in Justice Chan Seng-on's judgment. And I'm going to read out this judgment to you so that I can put you in the proper context. Okay? And paragraph 49 reads as follows. I observe that no evidence was adduced of any new items that were recently discovered to be missing, i.e., the period around 28th of October 2016, which necessitated the immediate and sudden termination of party by the Liew family during the period when Mr. Liew was overseas. Instead, Mr. Liew's decision for party sudden termination was based on items that went missing over the years. In my view, this is not believable, and it is more likely that the fear of party's complaint to MOM rendered her termination urgent, at least in the eyes of the Liew family. So paragraph 49 really captures one of the most important points in the whole case. The judge was saying that he did not believe Liew Mun Leong's evidence that he had terminated party's employment because he suspected her of stealing over a number of years. Rather, the judge came to the finding that he believed Mr. Liew terminated party's employment because the family was afraid that she would complain to MOM over their illegal deployment of her to work in the son's house and the son's office. Now, the son and his family lived in another house, 39 Chancery Lane, which must just be, within walking distance of his parents' house at 49 Chancery Lane. Yeah. It is not in dispute that she had been deployed there to work, all right, on occasions. Now, what is in dispute is how often she was deployed there to work, all right? I'm not going to go into that. And it is also not in dispute that she had been deployed to work in the son's office, to clean up the office. Now, of course, you know that is illegal, unlawful, under the MOM regulations and guidelines. When all of us employ foreign maids, we are specifically told that that maid can only work for that particular house, all right, or premises. She cannot be used to work in other places. I know sometimes, some people use their domestic maids to work in hawker stalls. Yeah, that happens quite often. All right. Oh yeah, she then goes to work for um, in the houses of children or relatives and all that. That is not allowed. And so what the judge here is saying is this: Party Liane had made complaints to the family that she was unhappy about her deployment because she felt that she was not being compensated adequately for all this work. Yeah, she was paid, $10, $20, $30. I don't know. I mean, that is in dispute, but really, the sums were not significant. She felt she was being underpaid for this additional work and she was not happy. And they knew that there was a danger of her complaining to MOM, and especially on the day when she was terminated. She had threatened to complain to MOM about the illegal deployment. And so, in the judge's view and conclusion, Liew Mun Leong and his son made the police complaint in order to stop Party Liane from being able to complain to MOM. First, they terminated her hurriedly, gave her 2 to 3 hours to pack because they did not want to give her the opportunity to complain to MOM. And then they followed that up with a police report in the hope that this would put an end to any opportunity she would have in future of complaining to MOM about the illegal deployment. And of course, this is where the improper motive that everyone is talking about comes about. Because when you make a police report, you are obligated under the law to make a truthful report. There should not be any improper motive behind that police report. In fact, what you must say in the report must be the absolute truth. And if you are not telling the truth in that report, you can be prosecuted for making a false police report. And the penalties are severe. You can go to jail for, I think, up to a year, if I'm not wrong. And you can be fined, I think, up to $5,000 or $10,000 or thereabouts. Yeah, I have to check the provisions again. But the penalties are severe. And of course, the law requires all of us to tell the truth. And English law, Singapore law, places an emphasis on that because the truth can only come out when people try their best to tell the truth. That is why when you go into court, all right, and you are going to give evidence, you are going to be a witness, you need to take the oath. If you are a Christian or a Muslim, you need to swear, all right? By the Bible, by the Quran. If you are an atheist or you do not believe in anything, you are required to affirm. Okay, that is how seriously the law takes people telling only the truth and nothing but the truth. And that is why you also know about perjury. If you give false evidence in a court of law, you can be prosecuted for perjury. Yeah? And the same principle applies to giving evidence in a police report. And of course, telling the truth in a police report is important because there are consequences. For example, in this case, the party Liane case, what happened immediately after the report? A warrant of arrest was issued for her, against her. And once the warrant of arrest is issued, it means that the police can go about looking for her and arrest her. And was that not what happened when she came back to Singapore on the 2nd of December? She was arrested at the airport. Because once a warrant of arrest is issued, all the checkpoints, all the border checkpoints are notified. All right? Yeah? So you cannot flee the country. And once you enter into the country, if there's a warrant of arrest for you, you are arrested immediately. Those are the severe consequences. And that is why the whole nation is in uproar, because people instinctively know that this was an improper use of the law. It was an improper use of the law by an elite family, by a rich and powerful family. I'm telling you, you go and make a police report if you are a commoner. How many times or how often is the police going to issue a warrant of arrest immediately without even calling the other side up for interrogation? I have never come across it. I have never come across it. All right? In cases of national importance, yes, it can happen. I remember years ago when I was working in Indonesia, and you know there was a scandal known as the Bank Century scandal, all right, in which basically there was a lot of fraud committed through a bank known as Bank Century. Now, the vice president of Indonesia at that time, Yusuf Kala, immediately notified the police, the National Police of Indonesia, and immediately a warrant of arrest was issued to prevent the owner of the bank from leaving the country, and he was arrested. Well, that in that type of scenario, it is justified, okay? Because you are talking about an immediate capture of a very important witness who might otherwise flee. Yeah, he's a flight risk. But can you imagine in this case? You know that the maid has really gone back to Indonesia, and yet, just based on the complainant's report, the warrant of arrest is immediately issued. That to me is quite incredible. It is quite incredible. Yeah. And so, you know, the talking point throughout our nation today is how a rich, powerful family could have gotten the police to do that. Yeah. And it is wrong. It is wrong when you file a police report with an improper motive because you are afraid that your maid is going to do something untoward to you, which will have unpleasant consequences. Now, I must say, I know the AGC, the Attorney General's Chambers, has said that they are conducting a review of this case, and I think they are doing that because of the huge uproar that has happened in the last few days. They are doing a review. But I do not see how, in light of Justice Chan Seng-on's very clear judgment, they can refuse to do anything. Yeah. I don't see how they can do that. So, we now come next to the reaction of the establishment, which I find absurd and honestly quite disgusting. You had Temasek come out, and you know what the CEO of Temasek told basically the press and told the whole of Singapore? Oh, we must hear Liew Mun Leong's side of the story. Don't jump to conclusion. He is someone who has contributed a lot to Singapore. Okay? My friends, as most many of you have made a lot of comments on social media. All of us have contributed to Singapore. People who have served in NS have contributed to Singapore. Mothers have contributed to Singapore by bringing up their children. Teachers, whatever work you are doing, you are a tribute to our country and you have contributed. And Liew Mun Leong was paid very, very well, all right, for his services. In 1 year, I think in 2007, he took home a bonus of almost $21 million. All right. So, you know, it is not as if he is not being paid well. And I understand that his yearly remuneration is in the region of about $6 million. So you are talking about a very wealthy man, a very wealthy family. All right. And whatever contribution he has made to our country, and, you know, I am not trying to downplay that, but all of us are equal before the law. All right. And that is what is meant when we always use the phrase, the rule of law. We say that we are not ruled by people or persons. We are ruled by the law. And this concept came about because people in history revolted against tyranny, against tyrants, against kings who decided to do what they wanted to do based on their own whims. Yeah. In the old days, the kings thought that they were divine beings. And that was why in olden England, there was this concept that said that the king could do no wrong. And when the state prosecuted someone, you would find the captions R versus so and so. R stands for Regina, which means the majesty, the king. All right, so the king was the law. He was the law. And you know, in the 1600s, when England had the Civil War, and King Charles was defeated, and he was defeated by the parliamentary forces, all right? He was captured, and he was put on trial. And basically for treason, for having gone against his office. And his defense at trial was, there is no jurisdiction of the court to try me, because I am the king, I am the law, and I can do no wrong. But remarkably, Parliament that tried him said, the king is not a person. The king is an office. So, my friends, when you look at Queen Elizabeth II, for example, I know many of us are fascinated by the royalty. We talk about members of the royalty, you know, like celebrities, all right? Of course, they are celebrities. But you have to understand that constitutionally, the Queen is an office, not a person, all right? And in that case, Parliament came out with charges against King Charles, which preempted the charges that would later be laid in international tribunals for genocide. And basically the charges were offenses against humanity. What he had done were crimes against humanity in inciting his followers to fight against Parliament. All right? And they were regarded as offenses that went against his duties as an office bearer, as king. And they found him guilty and they executed him. It is the only time in English history when a king has been tried by Parliament and executed for treason. So, and that is where basically the rule of law comes from. You may be the king, you may be the poorest man in the world, in the country, but everyone is equal before the law. It does not matter at the end of the day whether you're rich and powerful or whether you're a pauper. Everyone is equal before the law. And so all democracies today like to claim that they have the rule of law. Yeah. And for us to be able to practice that, we must ensure that no matter how rich or powerful a person is, the law is blind and applies equally. And I am very happy, I am very glad that Singaporeans have come up in arms to say, you know, what you did was totally abysmal, was totally wrong. We are not going to stand for it. I am very glad that netizens have condemned Temasik's stance in trying to defend one of his own. Yeah, it does not matter how much you have contributed to society. If you have done wrong by the law, you must be punished. Yeah, and the rest of society, people not as fortunate as Mr. Liew and his family members, who cannot afford lawyers, just like Party Liane could not afford a lawyer. And she had the good fortune of having Home, that NGO organization, you know, come to her assistance, and Mr. Anil Balachani to be her lawyer, who fought tooth and nail for her, you know, and eventually secured her acquittal. Not many of us not many in society have that luxury. I know of many people today who are in all sorts of difficulties and who cannot afford a lawyer, and who, when they apply for class, all right, for legal aid, is refused legal aid by the state. Yeah. So that is my take on the case, ladies and gentlemen. You know, for the last 6 days, I have basically posted about nothing on my Facebook except about this case. Please go to my Facebook and see all the posts I have done in relation to it. On Tuesday morning, I made the call. I said Lucien Wong, as the Attorney General, has to recuse himself from taking any further part in this case. He definitely cannot be involved in the review of the case. All right? The reason being that he and Liew Mun Leong were fellow directors on the board of Capital Land. I know Lucien Wong left the board around 2006. But, you know, in a case of this nature, there must not be a whiff of conflict of interest. All right? And yesterday, of course, they made the announcement that Lucien Wong has recused himself. And they said that, you know, he was not involved in the prosecution of Party Liane. And yeah, let's see. But the authorities must do something. All right? The authorities must do something. And I think the eyes of all Singaporeans are on what the Attorney General's chambers is going to do next. It cannot be a case where everything is just whitewashed, covered up, and nothing is done. Yeah. And I take great objections also to what Mr. Shanmugam said. Was it yesterday or was it the day before? I can't quite remember now. Where he told people not to go on a witch hunt. All right, not to prejudge. Nobody's going on a witch hunt. People know what Justice Chan Seng On's judgment said, and they are understandably upset about it. All right? Now, the avenues of appeal have closed. There is no more avenue of appeal. So it is pointless as it is pointless for Mr. Dilan Sandrasekhar, the CEO of Temasek International, to say that we must hear Liew Mun Leong's side of the story before coming to judgment. Liew Mun Leong gave evidence at the trial of party Liane. He was cross-examined. So were other members of his family. Their stories have been heard, and that is our judicial process. Relevant witnesses give evidence in court. They are cross-examined by opposing counsel, all right, to test that evidence. The judge, the court, at the end of the day, comes to a decision based on the evidence before the court. So what else can we possibly entertain? If Mr. Liew was to come out tomorrow with his version of the story, all right, a repeat of the story which he told the court, I have no doubt, will it change anything? No. Why? Because Justice Chan Seng-on, who had the last word in the matter, as the judge, as the appellate judge, has already pronounced judgment. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is my take on the party Liane case. I am sure the case has not ended, or well, the judicial process has ended, but we have not heard the last of the case, and we are waiting with bated breath now as to what the Attorney General's chambers will do next once the review is complete. Okay, I would like now to take a few questions and to read out some of the comments that have come through with following what I have said. Chuck Chan, you said Indonesia should raise a sovereign case versus the Liews and state for wrongful imprisonment of his citizen party. Now, Chuck, what I can say is this. In many countries, when one of its nationals are involved in a criminal case or has been charged, the embassy of that national will follow the case very closely. All right, they will send observers to the court. They will give whatever assistance they can to their own national. All right, because yes, you have to understand, all right, your own person is in a foreign country. She has been charged with a criminal offense. It is frightening, and in many cases, this person will be in remand. That means, she would actually be in jail awaiting trial. I think in Party's case, that probably didn't happen because she was out on bail. But that, in a lot of cases, foreign nationals are not so fortunate. They will end up in remand because they cannot afford to put up the bail, or no one is prepared to step forward to provide the bail. I think in this case, Party, was a lucky person. She had home behind her who provided bail or who found a person to stand bail for her, so she was out on remand. But still, 4 years is a terribly long time to undergo this ordeal. All right? And I can tell you, when you are charged with an offense, or you even have a court case, it is on your mind all the time. All right? I have had clients who were not even involved in criminal cases, involved in civil cases. And many of them were rich people, but this case just consumed them. They became angry, they became emotionally charged. All right? And I've had to tell many of them, hey, so and so, I really don't think that you can stand the strain of litigation. I think it is best you try and find an amicable settlement. All right, you can walk away from it. Your time is better spent making money. All right, doing your business, making money. And at the end of the day, I always tell people, if you go to court with the idea that I want my day in court and I want to recover 100%, you are going to be very disappointed, because the litigation process rarely works out that way.
The litigation process rarely gives you 100% of what you are looking for. Okay? So I tell my clients, don't be so strong and obstinate in the positions you take. Understand that in litigation, there are what we call litigation risks. No lawyer worth his salt will tell you, I guarantee you 100% success. Okay? Because that lawyer is not the judge who's going to decide your case at the end of the day. All right? So, no, to come back to your question, I do not think the Indonesian government has any jurisdiction to charge or to claim against Liew Mun Leong for whatever wrongs they think he might have visited on Party Liane. Party Liane has to be the person if she wants to bring any action for redress, all right, against Liew Mun Leong or other members of the family. Okay? And yes, she is entitled to do that, but of course then she has to find a lawyer who's willing to do the case for her, and whether that lawyer is willing to do it pro bono, that is another question. But certainly Indonesia as a state has no jurisdiction, has no claim against Liew Mun Leong. All right? I hope I have answered your question. Jonathan Tan, you made a comment, my favorite politician. I thank you very much for that compliment. I always try to give things straight, you know, without diluting it, without embellishing it. I think it is necessary to in Singapore to develop this culture of just being very straight talking. I think that for too long, for too many decades, Singaporeans have hunkered down because they were fearful. I think that has been very detrimental to the development of our society, not just in terms of civil rights, but increasingly in terms of our economic competitiveness. And I do believe that when you have a frightened people, you are going to have a people who are not as creative as they can be. And I have lived in other countries before. I am not someone who falls for the PAP narrative that we are far superior to our Asian neighbors. I think, in fact, in the last 2 decades, we have regressed. And that is my honest opinion. And, you know, who best to have said it than the founder of the PAP himself, Lee Kuan Yew. Years before he died, he gave an interview to 3 American academics who produced a book. And he said, China will never be as creative or innovative as America, because unlike America, the Chinese do not have the freedom of expression. So even he recognized it. But of course, for selfish political purposes and to ensure the continued rule of the PAP, most of all the PAP politicians clamped down on the freedom of speech. And he used draconian means, defamation suits, detention under the ISA, you know, whatever, all right, to stifle political commentary and dissent. And that had a percolating effect because, you know, it even affected me. I have to admit, I grew up in the 80s in Singapore, which I thought was a golden era for development in Singapore. But I saw how Lee Kuan Yew persecuted his political opponents, like J.B. Jeyaretnam, who was bankrupted because of defamation suits, you know, and that was frightening, wasn't it? And when you do that as a leader, you send out a message to society, and it percolates down the rest of society. And as a result today, what happens? You know, you talk about something controversial, and you then have your friends or you have parents who tell you, shh, don't say that. You know, that might get you in trouble. Why should that get me in trouble? Why should that get me in trouble? And I think it is a terrible thing we are teaching our kids. And I have seen in coffee shops or in restaurants before, where children express their views and their parents hush them up. And their parents, look around worriedly behind their shoulders to see if anyone was listening in. I mean, this is the society Lee Kuan Yew has created. And this is not the society that I think is going to be beneficial to Singapore for the rest of this century. So we must change that. All right? So, Jonathan Tan, I thank you for your compliment, but I'm also taking the opportunity to tell Singaporeans, or to you, my friends on Facebook and YouTube, how I think opposition politicians like myself should behave. All right? Some people say, oh, you're an extremist. Well, I don't care if I'm an extremist. So long as I am forthright in my views, I don't talk nonsense. All right? I'm not a racist. I'm not xenophobic. All right? I'm entitled to express whatever views I like. You may disagree with my views, and all of us can respect our differences in opinions. Frank Kam, your comment was such a great disgrace to Singapore, a first world country with such a rich and evil man with his intention to condemn an innocent maid to jail with his evil plot. Yes, Frank, I think that is a valid comment. That is where we come back to the improper motive behind the police report in the first place. And look, an improper police report led to 4 years of agony for, a lowly maid, all right? I mean, no disrespect to Party Liane. I lived in Indonesia for many years. I know the background of people like Party Liane, why they had to come to our country to work, to send back money, to help other family members, in the hope that they can have a better life. Yeah. You put her through 4 years of ordeal, during which she could not earn a single cent. Yeah. And it's not only that. I mean, you put her through all that worry. And you know what? What is the cost to the Singapore society as well? This trial, my friends, took up 22 days of court time. Can you believe that? 22 days of court time. That means state resources had to be spent, all right, for 22 days of court. You had lawyers arguing, you had the DPP who are paid by the state, all right, you had the police investigators who had to be in court as well. 22 days, you had the judge, of course, yeah? So it is a terrible waste of state resources, is it not, at the end of the day? And that is why I say, how can the Attorney General's chambers not do something? Yeah? Yes. Chin Lai Lim, you said, good said, well said. His contributions and his ill character are two different issues. We are all equal in front of the law. Yes, Chin Lai, I totally agree with you. It comes back to the point again. If we are serious about the rule of law, let us practice properly. All right? But in reality, it is very difficult, isn't it? The establishment will always try to protect its own. Yeah? I mean, think about it, my friends. If you are just an ordinary worker, and you have been charged, or there is a judgment that has come out against you, Will your employer step in like Temasek did in this instance and say, oh, please don't be too quick to come to judgment. Please hear my employee's side of his story. How many of your employers will do that? Or how many of your employers have done that? All right? So that is the rule of law. We have to respect the law. And many of us have been on the wrong end of the law. I have been on the receiving end of judgments that I don't like, that I think is wrong. But at the end of the day, as an officer of the court, being a lawyer, I have to respect the law. If you're not happy with the law, you have the right to appeal. But in this case, there is no more appeal, right? It is our legal system. And this is where the judicial process must stop. Ladies and gentlemen, I have only been able to field very few questions from you. I tell you, my assistant has been taking in all these comments and questions, as you can see. I'm afraid that time does not permit me to go through all of them, but I thank you for your input. I want to leave you with a funny story, which was told to me around 2000, the year 2000, when I was about to do a very high profile and very important case in the High Court, involving a lot of international characters. And I was doing a shipping case which had been fought, across jurisdictions, Italy, Greece, and finally, even in the UK, and then eventually the last leg came to Singapore. And my client told me a funny story. He had been involved in the Italian courts. This is to drive home the point again. Now, I'm not asking you to take the wrong message from this story, okay? In fact, I'm asking you to do exactly the reverse. To realize how important when you take that oath in a court of law to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And also, when you go to the police station to make a police report, please tell only the truth with no improper motives, okay? But the story is this. In Italy, when a witness goes into court, all right, if he is a plaintiff witness, he has to take the oath. And Italy is largely a Catholic country, right? So the oath there is very, very important. Yeah? And they have to take the oath. The only person who is exempt from taking the oath in an Italian court is the defendant. Why? Because the Italians, probably with a superior understanding of human nature, or very good understanding of human nature, understand that as the defendant, you will lie to save your own skin, or you will lie, all right, to try and get out of the hot soup you're in. So, and when you take the oath, it is not only your responsibility to the law. And of course, if you are a person of faith, all right, and you have sworn on, let's say, the Bible or the Quran to tell the truth, there are consequences if you don't, all right? There's the belief that you'll be damned, you'll go into hell, whatever. You're committing a mortal sin. So I've never forgotten that story. In an Italian court, the defendant does not take the oath. But for the rest of us, in a Singapore court, whether you are a plaintiff or a defendant, you are the accuser or you are the accused, everyone takes the oath to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed this, and I'll see you next week. Thank you. And before I go, please take note of this as well. As you know, I started a campaign, or my political party, People's Voice, started a campaign to abolish Seika. All right, your signatures have been flooding in. They have been incredible. And one of the ways for you to register onto this petition to abolish Seika is also to WhatsApp us, SMS us. All right. Now the number has changed. Okay, can you please take note of this number? We will advertise it on my Facebook again, but the number to send in your message or your WhatsApp is 86574974. I say again, 86574974. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, and see you next week.